This is part 5, the last of the 5 videos for chapter 6 on functions. In this video we are going to talk about passing variables as parameters, and we will see what benefit is gained from doing that. And we're also going to show you how to use functions in a practical way, and that when you have a menu-driven program, there's a pattern that you can use for your functions. So let's look at the function that you see. We've seen various versions of reading a value. We've seen a version where the read function returns a value of the type that you're reading. This is different because this is a void function, and it takes one parameter. And notice that the parameter includes the ampersand. And the ampersand indicates that the parameter must be a variable. So you're being passed a variable, and the function has ownership of that variable during the function call. So in this case, we have a function to read a whole number, and the number is read into the parameter, and as a result of reading the number into the parameter, the number is in effect being read into the variable used when the function was called. So down here we have read number, we're passing it val. What gets passed is the variable val, so that when num is used in the input statement, it's the same as val being read. So if I type in 16 here, 17 rather, I would expect the answer to be 17. So let's take a look at the function here. Here's the code. I'm going to show you the value before reading, show you the value after reading. Then we're going to show you, we're going to try and attempt to use this the wrong way. So let's go ahead and compile. We're going to run it. And before reading, the value is 5, and now it's going to say enter a whole number. I'm going to say 17. And so basically what has happened, I am printing out the value of the variable value. So it appears that the variable has indeed been changed. Before I made the call, it was a 5. After I make the call, it has been changed to 17. That is, it has been changed to the value that was the input. Now let's try something. And the requirement when you have a function that receives a variable, you must use as an argument an actual variable. Let's see what happens if we try to make the call using not a variable but a constant. See what's going to happen. Okay, notice that the compiler is saying we have a problem in line 17. Line 17 is the call, and it says it could not convert 14, the number 14, to an int followed by ampersand. Another way of looking at int followed by ampersand is as an integer variable. So as a result, the compiler will not permit this. Again, the moment we see the ampersand, it means when you call the function, you must pass a variable. Okay. Now, the use of this ampersand is called call by reference. All right. So we have a reference parameter if we have an ampersand. And we've seen what it does. It makes the parameter an alias for the variable that was passed. Whatever changes are done to the parameter are also done to the variable. Alright, so according to this prototype that we have here, what is it telling us? Well, it's really telling us that the function getDimensions, when you call it, you must pass two things. The first thing must be a variable, and the second thing must be a variable. Now, using pass by reference, it is possible for us now to write a function that can produce more than one result. Let's take a look at square cube. We pass it a float value, and we pass it, the next argument must be a float variable, and the third argument must be a float variable. And notice that we are putting a result into into the second and third parameter. In other words, when you call this function, you pass it two variables and a value, and the variables will be updated based on the value of the variable. So let's take a look at this function. Alright, so we have, here's the function. We have v 12.5, and we're going to call it and see what results we have after we're done. We're going to do it again with 25 and see what happens. So we're going to call it, and we have 12.5 squared equals v squared. So v squared has been defined, and so forth. So it's clear that v squared is changing and v cubed is changing as a result of making the function call. All right? Another place where we use pass by reference is when we want to read using streams. This function, what does it do? It reads a value into a string variable. So it reads a value into a string variable. Notice that the first parameter is a stream. When we declare an input stream, we always say if stream and then a variable name. Notice that this does not have the f in it, but it says this is an input stream. It turns out that an input stream can either be the standard input stream, cin, or it can be an input file stream that the user declares. What's the consequence of that? Well, the consequence really is that this function can be used to read from a file, but it can also be used to read from the keyboard. So if I want to read it from a file, I need to have a stream open, and I can read it and pass the stream variable, which is an iStream, and I'm passing it by reference. And that simply means that I'm able to change the file. We change a file by reading something because where we are in the file changes after we read something. All right? So let's take a look at that function and see what happens, just to demonstrate that for you. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, here's the function. And there's magic here we don't need to talk about. And we're going to first read from the keyboard. So we're going to call the same function. All right? So we're going to prompt for a string, then we call the function, and the function will actually do the reading from the keyboard. And then we're going to call the function, this time passing in a file stream, an input file stream, and read the string that way. So let's give it a shot. Enter a string. This is from the keyboard. From the keyboard is our string. I think it's reading one word. Keyboard. Okay. So we read it from the keyboard, and when we read it from the file, we're reading the word November, because the My Data file contains the word November. All right. Now, here's a reminder. If you have a reference parameter, then you indicate it by putting an ampersand after the data type. Second thing is any argument that's in the position of a reference parameter must be a variable. It can't be an expression. And the other thing to note is file stream objects must always, or stream objects, IO stream objects must always be passed by reference. Okay, I want to just skip right ahead to talk about menu-driven programs. Remember the code that we wrote for menu-driven program? We said a menu-driven program is the case where you use a do-while loop. And what are you repeating? You're repeating the process of display the menu, get the menu choice, perform the menu choice. And by now I hope you see that instead of putting all the code in the main program, we can write two functions. One function that displays the menu and reads the choice, and a second function that has the switch in it that performs the menu choice. So that a menu-driven program now can be written in terms of two functions and the main. And by doing this, notice that the main is extremely simple, because you're calling the first function and you're calling the second function. You continue to do that until the choice becomes whatever the quit character is. Okay. With this, we have ended our presentation of Chapter 6.